I am very pleased to begin a presentation here of some design concepts and some information from our architect. Mr. David Schrader is here with members of his team in the audience. You'll hear from a variety of us this evening. Mr. Lanier did say, I want to hear more about option one. I am pleased to say that that's what tonight's agenda item is primarily. So to kick things off here, Mr. Nicholson, I think you're kind of driving for a little bit for me. So if you go to the next slide. All right, so we're going to give a brief background for those who have not tuned in to previous forums, in particular last March and April. But kind of give a brief background of where we've been and where we're headed. We'll talk about the process and how we got to some of the images and designs that you will see before you this evening. There we go. Looks like you might have gotten it. Okay, next slide, please. And as just a reminder, and was referenced, I think, by Mr. Scrocky and maybe Mr. Linke at some point, and Ms. Wesley during the Finance Committee meeting, that we do have a 10-year capital improvements project list. And of those things on the list, and Mr. Scrocky said some of that does include high school repairs, there are currently $114 million worth of need at the high school if you were to just fix the needs. So some of the details on the score of that capital project list, which will be presented later this month, are outlined here. Next slide, please. So this is some data that was presented as a result of a climate survey last year from all ninth graders from 2 years ago. So it was presented last year, 2 years ago. Hanover conducted a survey of all ninth grade students, and we opened it up to the community and staff, but these are the answers from students and their parents in terms of how many ninth graders did or would have participated in extracurricular activities or programming at the high school. So the graph above, you see that 31% of kids participated, ninth graders participated in extracurricular activities at the high school, whereas 77% said they would have, had it been on campus with them. And then down below, you see the 13% participated in coursework. So they came to the high school for academic reasons in ninth grade. So this is all data that's been presented before. This is just kind of a reminder of why ninth grade. Next slide, please, Mr. Nicholson. Here are some other limitations that exist with having ninth grade off of our high school campus. Certainly clubs, activities, academic programming, certain academic programs specifically like the Engineering Academy, our internship program, access to North Monco. Are these things possible for our ninth graders? Yes, they are currently possible, but it does require students to get on a bus, more than an hour earlier than their peers, come to North Penn High School, take their classes, take a bus back, be separated from their peers for a portion of the day. So there's definitely drawbacks to that. And as you saw from the previous data, many of our students say they would have taken other classes, but they didn't want to because ninth grade was separated. So as part of our process, next slide, please, Mr. Nicholson, we did some visits to neighboring schools and school districts. So you see Falls Church was in that high school. It was Meridian High School in Falls Church, Virginia, Gulf Elementary School in King of Prussia, Manavin Elementary School in Phoenixville. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Springfield High School, that is Delco, not Springfield Monco. State College High School, and then Upper Marion High School as well. And we got kind of a testimony here from Meridian High School in Falls Church. I reached out to the head of school there just last week and said, could you give me kind of a testimony or your thoughts on the renovations in your high school and the impact it's had on students? And she responded quite eloquently with, the open learning spaces truly foster a sense of agency of our students. They're empowered to engage with each other in collaborative environments that they architect. By removing physical barriers that can be contained within the walls of a traditional learning space, our students have the freedom to engage authentically with each other. We have seen an increase in instructional engagement as well as work completion. Our teachers have adapted their lessons and unit plans to incorporate the open learning spaces into their instructional planning and delivery. So as was well broadcast, next slide please, we did a tour of Upper Marion High School that was open to the community. We had a bus full of folks that we toured North Penn High School first. We talked about what they could see if they went to Upper Marion. We live streamed it on Facebook. So this is just an image from that visit. And Schrader Group was the architect for Upper Marion as well. Next slide please. So I also reached out to Jonathan Bauer, no relation, who is the principal at Upper Marion, and Mr. Bauer said that the design of our new Upper Marion High School has provided increased instructional opportunities, allowing for spaces that are more conducive to communication and collaboration styles of today's current student. This facility has also impacted our school climate and culture by instilling a new level of school pride in our student Viking nation, as well as increased pride from our staff in the quality of the professional workplace. Our entire school community has greatly benefited from the opportunity to redesign our school setting to match the current and future needs of our students. So we've had a wide breadth and depth of consensus building, priority establishment, and kind of design concept, which Mr. Schrader will share with you in a few minutes. But in designing and talking through our priorities, they gave us surveys, they showed us images, we went on tours. There have been several hundred people involved in the process up to now. And we kind of gave Mr. Schrader and his team priorities and what we would like to see. And we saw images of things that we thought, you know what, we would love to see that in North Penn High School. Yes, this would be a great addition to our building. And if we had to itemize our priorities, and it's not an all-inclusive list, but this was kind of the things that really resonated and stuck out, were inclusivity and accessibility, flexibility and adaptability, safety and security, collaboration, community, sustainability, outdoor connection and outdoor learning, and pride in our school or branding. Next slide, please. So, after we did all this with our staff, our department leaders, some folks at the middle school, the high school, the administration, of course, Dr. Dietrich was involved at that time, and the cabinet, and this has been going on since 2017, I think, is when we started working with Mr. Schrader. Obviously, COVID delayed things for a couple years, but we finally got to a point where we brought community in, and we had a renovation planning design workshop. We had a follow-up to that workshop at the end of August where they shared some concepts and some designs. They're very gray images with no liveliness to them quite yet, but just to get some feedback and some thoughts. Some changes had been made since that August meeting. We have another meeting with that exact same group. They're all invited back next week to get more feedback. And then hopefully we have a final design and final estimate to go before the board for a resolution for a referendum. So we have to have a number that is going to go on that referendum and the ballot question. And so the architects are working right now to get us a design, and then it goes out to get some estimates. Certainly they work with Dewey Engineering. I see Mr. Lynch in the audience this evening, and really get an authentic estimate. How much would this cost, and what are we asking on that ballot question? So I'm very proud of the process. This has been comprehensive and exhaustive, to say the least. I think the images and concepts that you see before you this evening will wow you, and hopefully you can see all the thought that went into this. I am absolutely stunned and could not be more impressed by what I see in these images from Mr. Schrader and his group. And one thing I think it resonates most, and I said it in the Superintendent Live update with Mr. Gilmer on Facebook, he said to me, he put it simply, he said, "Todd, would you say that our high school today meets our needs?" And I said, absolutely not. And all it takes is one walk through the hallways in between classes and the ways in which we're trying to spill out into the hallways and make a 1971 high school work in 2023. So why would we just refurbish that space? Why wouldn't we make it conducive to what we want to do in today's high schools and what you're seeing in today's high schools? So it is not just about large hallways. It is not just about open spaces, but it's about the possibilities for learning that just can't happen in a 1970 building. So, Mr. Schrader, the floor is yours. I know for those who have already looked at the agenda, there are 100 slides, but he has promised me that they will go at a very nice pace this evening. So, Mr. Schrader, without further ado, please, we're going to play a video about that design process, and then you'll take it after the video.
Over 70 people from the community, including teachers, parents, neighbors, community and business leaders, as well as middle school and high school students, attended this workshop coordinated by the North Penn administration and the architect, the Schrader Group.
So the premise is, if we add on the square footage necessary to have 9th grade on our campus, what do we want? what does the community prioritize, where should things be, and having conversations about the vision of what this could look like.
Before the hands-on portion of this workshop, attendees heard from Superintendent Dr Bauer, Pete Nicholson, Administrator for Secondary Education and Renovations, and our architect, David Schrader, on current design elements of modern school renovations and construction. And then the groups got to work.
We've turned the building program that we've worked on for the last year into a whole series of manipulatives. Those will be used for moving around on the site plan so that people can really take a look at the site functions, the building functions, and all of those parts and pieces that go together. Our real goal here, if we don't come up with a full design, is to really try to get some ideas from people, big picture ideas that we can take away and turn into a facility concept to move towards your referendum concept.
So what if we did this, though?
We've been hearing from us and in public comment and our administrative team and the architects for years about this, and now it is to get more explicit feedback from the community about the priorities, because this is a community center for all of us.
Tonight we talked a lot about what the high school could look like after renovations, and we did this really cool exercise where we had manipulatives, almost like Legos.
It was the most exciting, entertaining, collaborative event. Just really exciting.
I helped design blueprints for the new school renovation and a diagram of what it might look like.
You had to put the pieces in, and it's scary to move the first part, but when we really broke it down to what had to stay in place, just having a thoughtful discussion about what we envisioned and where things had to go, it just came together.
And we got to imagine, if we were the architects or the designers of the building, where everything would go.
We tried to make the best design using parts of the school that we absolutely couldn't move and move around other parts to accommodate ninth grade the best and really change the school for the better.
I have some master planning background, so I thought my skill set would be helpful. It was a lot of fun. We generated a lot of great ideas, and hopefully the Schrader Group's got some good plans to start from.
And reimagining isn't as easy a process as one might think.
Drop off, you got to maintain some component of entrance, maybe here. Maybe
it's a lot harder than you would think to fit everything, and understanding everything that goes into a building. It's a little mind-blowing.
To wrap the evening, the 8 groups presented their thought process on the layout of the facility.
Spaces and media center.
The meeting was a key step in outlining the priorities, vision, goals, and facility needs at North Penn High School, and what a building renovation and potential 9th grade addition could look like.
After this, architects will start to design, and they're going to give a schematic design of what the building could look like. And then if we were to go to a referendum in the winter or spring, hopefully our community will be able to see, what are you voting for? If I vote yes, what's it going to look like?
What I'm looking forward to is finally getting this project moving. It has been a project that we were looking to start in 2019. And obviously with the pandemic, that really set us back a couple years. So I'm just really looking forward to finally getting the show on the road here with the design concept. And I'm really glad that we have all these different members of our school district to participate in this design phase.
Honestly, I had an amazing time, a lot more fun than I thought I would at a 4-hour meeting. I think we learned a lot about what the community thinks, what the staff and the students think. And I thought it was really interesting because going into this, I thought the general idea would be, have the 9th graders separate, but I was hearing a lot, and personally I think so too, integrating the 9th graders. But it was a really great night. I think we learned a lot, and I think it was really successful.
A lot of really interesting discussions about what we need in a high school that's going to serve us for the next, hopefully, 30 years.
It was a really cool experience. I've been in the district since kindergarten, so getting to imagine what the district's going to look like for my brother, for other people that are coming in, was really, really great.
I'm excited about the future of what could happen and what things will look like. Proud member of the class of 1984, and everything still looks like when the school was built, and it's time to update things.
The feedback from tonight will help the Schrader Group create a schematic concept that will be presented to the community and the school board for further discussion.
I'm just really excited and appreciative of everyone's time. Looking forward to their honest feedback and unfiltered feedback. Looking forward to what we hear this evening.
3, 2, 1, money!
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Bauer. So that is going to take care of about 20 slides. So I hope everybody feels a little better about the slide deck you just heard about. So what's interesting is that was back in, I think that was July, and then August we came back and gave the very first presentation of this, which we'll call conceptual design, and we've moved that into what we call now the beginning of schematic design, so that Dewey Engineering has something to estimate, and that's really what the goal has been to this point. The other thing about this is that we had to work with the vision that people really generated, particularly that night, but what we've heard over and over again, and try to take that and depict it within your 50-year-old building. And that's the challenge that's kind of given to us, and we've worked to what you'll see in a little bit here to try to make that happen. But in a 50-year-old building that originally, as we understand it, was developed to house about 2,500 students, there are certain passageways through the building, and there are certain ways of learning that the building is set up for. You then added K-Pod, which added an increase in students to that, which also added to the total number of people passing through the hallways at any one point in time. And the hallway sizes were not changed, the wayfinding was not changed, and in general, the instructional methodology stayed very much the same as the building that is now over 50 years old. And so the limitations that we found really dealt with circulation, dealt with the kinds of learning spaces. And I think what you'll see throughout this presentation is what we, and we are not educators, we acknowledge that, but what we hear from educators over and over again is the desires are to, of course, instruct, as happens in a school, but then to research, which happened a little bit less, at least when I was in school, then to make, write, and create. That's the third element of all this, and finally present. And so if all of those are part of the makeup of the next generation student, then that's the kinds of things that the folks here and others have toured facilities and seen, spaces that support those. So you went through the workshop process. We armed everybody with the existing conditions of the site, of the existing floor plans and the uses of the floor plan currently. We then developed, because this had been happening over summer and fall of 2022, an overall building program. In other words, what spaces are needed for the 10 to 12 program and what sizes are they, what spaces are needed for the 9th grade program, and what sizes and relationships to each other are those. And so that's what you see up here. So those manipulatives that several people, including myself, referred to were definitely Lego building blocks reflecting the overall program needed to do that. And when people started out in this process, these are the primary site planning considerations they looked at. You can pick out all of these as major issues that you would see on any school site. Clearly, the one that would happen that you would have to really think about if you had the number of students on the site that you are envisioning is a clear separation of parent and bus drop-off and clearly parking areas that allow for people to traverse the site safely while that kind of circulation is going on. So what we thought we would do is just show you one team. There were 8 teams in this workshop process. One team, just so you could see how this worked out. It took people a while to understand how to work this onto the site. So that was part of the fun at the beginning of the process. But I think you can see that people got the idea and started to figure out how a building organizes. And that's kind of a cool thing. Better yet, you see how people were organizing sports on the site and so on. And so this was Team 1's depiction. And our job then was to take each of these and try to figure out what they were really getting at. So here's a very simplified version of that. And you can see that clearly the athletics and PE continue to work around the perimeter of the site with the perimeter fields. The idea of the commons is something that people saw when they toured each of the high schools. And we've shared imagery of all of this. We won't share that tonight. But what we will share is the imagery of potential commons in this building and how that connects throughout the day, all of the academic areas, but better yet, at night connects the athletics, connects the performing arts, and anything else that might go on in that building, because these buildings today are built for 18-hour days, not 7-hour days. The Orange is STEAM. So that's our science, technology, engineering, arts, maybe not the math. The math ends up probably back in the academic areas, but also the research area related to that. That took a prime role in each of these. In this case, what it was doing was becoming a corner link between the 9th grade academics, if you truly added a 9th grade program, and what could be the 10th to 12th grade academics. So the idea here, and we're going to segue from this at some point here, is in this case, 9th grade was seen as a separate element from 10th to 12th. And I'll just state that for this site. Last thing I'll share from this team one, at the end, everybody had to report out, and folks had to identify the items that they thought were most important from that particular team's concept. So comments close to the main entry, close to all these. 9th grade connected to the rest of the school, but can flow into the rest of the building. Building support in the back of the building, which is we hope that happens anyway. And then this idea of how is 9th grade or 10th to 12th grade connected? Are they all connected through the STEAM area and STEM area? Or do they start to flow amongst each other as time goes on? That's the way we entertained each of these. And you'll see as we align the concepts people came up with on the left with the interpretation on the right, you'll see this constant of the STEM and STEAM area being approximately where your library is today and all of these other pieces connected. Some of the givens, performing arts is not moving. The auditorium is the most expensive part of any building. We do not move a giant auditorium that's in the place that it is. We renovate it and we make it even a better auditorium. The pool is another one of those givens. Those are the other most expensive elements in a high school building. So that is where it is. And of course, the idea of all the athletics and phys ed definitely form themselves around that. Beyond that, there's a lot of opportunity to reuse different portions of the building for different uses. And so Team 2 did this. Team 3 did this. You'll see the Commons is in a pretty consistent area. That's J-Pod. Okay? So in each case, folks saw that connectivity between that central spot that J-Pod currently is and the performing arts and the athletics and then the rest of the academic area. So another one, Commons moved in this version. Another one, you can sort of see the similarities starting to occur. And of course, the academics all seem to want to work around the perimeter, partially because the pods create the natural areas for classrooms and learning spaces. And so this is just all the way up to Team 8. So great stuff. These were a lot of fun to look at, a lot of fun for people to do, and it gave people the idea to understand what the issues really are in a building of this size and of this age. And so these are some of the things that folks stated specifically they wanted to carry forth as ideas. Cafeteria gets relocated, becomes a Commons. There was a conversation about K-Pod being a ninth grade structure, and then what you'll see are the balance of these say, you know, 9th grade really could be just assimilated into the rest of the building. Corridors, how do you move 1,000 more students through the corridors? 9th grade, one was from a student here, the second one. 9th grade's anxious to get to the high school. The comment was, it's like having a dog in a fence with the squirrel on the other side. They want to get to the high school so badly that they really want to take advantage of those opportunities. So all really nice reactions, particularly from the students, about what's important to them about getting to a building like this. So that turned into concept development. What we've shared with the working team, with your administrative group over the last month got us to what we'll share in a moment. Again, back to the site planning topics and the things that became important. And if you take those elements on this existing site and you look at those as bus circulation, parent drop-off, separated parking can be staff, it can be parents and other parking areas, and then it can be students. So how do you provide areas for each of those groups so that they can leave and come all at different times? Where do the athletics go? Where do the learning communities fit on the site? And finally, how do you service the building? So another given when you get to the site is the stadium. You just did it. It's anchoring in the corner of the site. You now have the radio site on the right-hand side that provides you opportunity. You have a whole series of playing fields on the left side of the plan that also allow opportunity. So that ring or that perimeter seems to be the natural and continues to be the athletic area. All of the teams agreed with that. Service, there's a really little yellow arrow just above the white that says service. So somehow we have to find a place in the building to be able to load for kitchens, load for the building, and so on. So that will become part of the design. Bus circulation. Right now the bus circulation's on the right-hand side of the site. Adding buses to this means that we'll have to expand and extend that. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. Parent drop-off. The natural was that it continues to come from South Valley Forge Road to some extent. And however you continue to create that loop, to extend it, to expand it, to allow you to keep vehicles off of South Valley Forge Road is important to the whole discussion. Separated parking. So we've got this great mass at the front parking, and there's an opportunity to develop parking at the rear of the site as well. And one of the major discussion points that came about was the lack of current parking for people adjacent to the stadium. How do you service the stadium? How do you service the other athletic fields so that people don't have the distance to trek to any of those elements when there are athletics going on in those? The learning communities, the buildings seem to naturally say the perimeters should be the learning communities, especially with the fixed elements in the building that I just talked about. So that developed into this very colorful site plan. Again, in the same orientation, you start to see on the right-hand side some of the orange areas are the classroom additions that will allow you to add the extra 1,000 students to the building. The orange on the left-hand side of the building are the additional athletic areas that allow you to expand the athletics. And you can see the commons in the center starting to link all of those, just like all of those concepts did. So what this is showing is an expanded parking area in the front of the building that allows a very clear drop-off loop from the right-hand side up and around to the left-hand side right in front of the building. And there's an idea to potentially, and by the way, all of this is conceptual, so everything has to be vetted with quite a few more people, as well as with the municipalities, the County Conservation District, and any of the other agencies, and PennDOT. So this is a starting point for conversation, and that's as far as this goes, and then it becomes time to start sharing this and getting feedback to it. You'll see that there's an extension of a roadway to Sumney Town Pike on the left-hand side. And the idea there was to potentially create an entry point to the site as an idea just to provide one more access point into the site. And if we did that, that would provide an opportunity for additional bus drop-off at the back of the building. We just talked about the large parking area that would really help out the stadium area, so that's what you're seeing at the back of the site, and then you're seeing the radio station site developed as further athletic fields. So that was an idea for a potential site. It is a good way for Dewey Engineering to understand how to potentially estimate this site because it does show where new playing fields would go and where new parking would go. A little bit further, on the right-hand side behind the neighborhood, we originally had what we call a chevron bus parking area where all of the buses pull up at angles and all structure themselves there for drop-off and pickup. We had a little bit of feedback at the last meeting where we presented the idea that perhaps that would eliminate a lot of the green space, unfortunately, and might create too much blacktop on that side. So as a team, we've all gone back and looked at the idea of just having bus line up adjacent to the curb instead, and it seems to work if we add that additional bus parking area at the back of the site as well. So it seems like there are already some compromising ideas that are leading to better solutions, and that's one of those. This just shows how that might sit on the site if you were to expand it to allow for this additional square footage, and it gives you a little sense of where some of the playing fields and parking could go. This is actually an earlier version of that. The prior plan is the one that's showing a little bit more accurately. So those are some of the site ideas that came about. I think probably the biggest element for the board and anybody who's looking at this tonight might want to take away is the overall organization of the site does not change a lot. Instead, there are upgrades to the site. There will be stormwater management that was not taken care of 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and 50 years ago because all the stormwater management requirements have changed. So what folks will see with any of these projects that are built today is that there's an incredibly significantly reduced amount of water that goes off of any site to the extent that it is less than any water that may be going off the site today. So, building. One of the primary elements or issues that came up as we talked about an expansion of a building like this was, what do you do about circulation? And I talked about this at the very beginning. So there was an idea to try to create a main street horizontally in the building that might have a whole series of arterial roads that run across it and create a little bit clearer circulation pattern in the building. And then on top of that, the other idea was to try to create some really more significant wayfinding other than 8.5 by 11 taped up signs with K-Pod this way. So there were ideas about that that came about as part of the presentation that seemed to make a lot of sense, and we want to go a little bit further with that in what you're about to see. The building commons is a primary element because it ties all of those elements together that we just talked about for the 18-hour-a-day use of the building. We also thought as a team that perhaps the perimeter classroom areas, because they connect to K-Pod, would be better served as 3-story facilities as well. And then a primary element of having the number of students on site that we're talking about here is trying to find a way to make the building feel like it has smaller learning communities so people can identify with smaller groups of people rather than a very large mass of people in one building. So that's the idea that you'll see as you start to see these teaming or clustered areas of classroom structures. Okay, so here's the existing site. Same way of looking at the site as we looked at the building. So this is pretty small, but you can see the building commons in orange that will connect performing arts, food areas, and athletics at any point in time during the day. It also connects back to the academic areas. Now you start to see these dashed lines running around the building. Instead of the weaving and bobbing and weaving, I guess is the right term, that you do through the corridors today, the idea was to try to create a little bit more alignment of the corridors to create a more clear passageway through the building. And those would all be tied together with a Main Street idea. And the Main Street would be intended to connect the building commons to all of those little arterial pathways through the building, but also connect to the bus drop-off and the parent drop-off so everything filtered onto this larger passageway sized to accommodate that large collection of students passing through the building. The program groupings. So clearly the athletics, as we stated at the beginning, want to be towards the perimeter near the playing fields. That's what the green is showing here. You're seeing the connectivity of that area, plus team rooms, plus locker rooms, to all of those athletic fields. You then see the performing arts, and we've already said that the auditorium is not moving. And so any expansion of the performing arts areas, including larger band areas, orchestral areas, and choral areas, would all want to be connected to that somehow, and finally have some connection to the exterior, because you do pull stage sets up to the building to try to bring into the auditorium, and you have a marching band that will exit from and enter to those areas from the building itself. Administration, that blue bar that you see at the bottom, for so many of today's school-related challenges, wants to be near an entry point to the building. There may be a discussion later on about taking parts of that administration and putting it out into different team areas so that you can feel like you're connected to smaller groups of student areas. The STEAM core, remember, we talked about media center or library, plus all of the science and technology spaces all connected there to the center. And it's a natural that it sits where the existing library is. So we'll share with you what that could look like. The 3-story academics on the perimeter. This had been the conversation about the 9th grade center snugly attached at one point in time. I think that that conversation has evolved a little bit to, could those be just classroom structures that can be assigned as necessary? So I think that's up to the administration and the board to make a decision at some point about whether that's specifically a grade structure or not. Doesn't matter. It will be flexible and available to you to use in any way that you want to use it. And there are little green stars in the center of 3 areas there. Those are meant to be the courtyards contained by these so that you have interior learning space and presentation space and exterior learning space and presentation space that's actually connected directly to the learning spaces. And then finally, the conversion of some of the pods at the back of the building into additional academic areas as well, so that you get groupings of smaller learning communities around the building, all connecting back to these primary program functions. And so that's the floor plan. So again, we're in a schematic design. What you're looking at today is merely to price something. What will happen over time is this will evolve significantly. So between now and whenever the first person puts a shovel in the ground, this concept will evolve. But you can see the primary colors representing all of the basic areas in the building, and you can see how clearly delineated they are. You can also see a fairly clear circulation pattern with the main street running left to right halfway through the building, and then vertical passageways that become smaller streets or arterials connecting back into the other areas of the building, all appropriately sized for the larger collection of students that would be in the building. And this is just the second floor and the third floor. And if you look at these in kind of a oblique view, you can see them stacking on top of each other, and finally a third floor to those 3 perimeter areas starting with the K-pod. So we, again, had to give some ideas of what this might look like related to the images that people saw as they toured the different buildings. So this is kind of a first look at all of this. Folks went to Upper Merion and a couple of other buildings and saw the student commons that connected all of the main portions of the building to be used throughout the day. And where you are right now is you're standing almost where your IT department is on the second floor of the building, looking back at your health suite, that's what the red brick is, and looking at your Audion from the back side. So this shows how, if you look a little bit to the right, you're looking at food service, the gymnasium, and the pool. If you were to go under that little underpass on the left-hand side, you would be right at the auditorium. So this sits right where J-Pod sits today and connects all of those elements together.
As Mr. Schrader is describing these images, I will do my best. It seems as though there's battery lagging here, but in placing my mouse where you would be standing, if that helps at all. So like this is the map. So where my mouse is right now, that's where J-Pod is. J-Pod is the round pod, for those who are familiar with the building. And so if we were standing, see the lag on the mouse, but if we were standing here looking back this way, this is what you would see. Okay? Continue, Mr. Schrader.
Sure.
And by the way, one thing, you keep using the acronym STEAM. I just don't know that everybody at home knows what STEAM means. It's science, technology, engineering, art, and math, just to be clear. Okay.
Bingo. Great. So materials, finishes, none of this is anything that we want to stick with. It's all just to give you an image of what a building might look like. These are dangerous because people get fixated on this as a final product. All we're trying to do is give you a sense of what space might feel like in the building and how things might connect back and forth. If you were to spin around about 90 degrees, actually this is 180 degrees, you're now almost at the entry to the commons. On your left-hand side would be the gym and the pool. On the right-hand side, all the way to the right, the brick is the Audion. The straight-ahead area is on the second floor is actually where your IT, the district IT is today. And under some of that daylighting area is where the auditorium entry is. So again, kind of similar to the Upper Merion that folks saw, this is what you could see if we were to do something like this there. We're showing a whole variety of seating types because these are becoming less just a dining space and more a multi-use space that students spend quite a bit of their day in. And this is just another view about 90 degrees off of where we were looking. You can see straight ahead is the Audion. Just another view of it to give you a little sense of some of the different seating areas in a space like this. And again, used all day, 4 different functions. Students tend to be in these spaces throughout the day doing their projects and working with others. What might be off of this? And so these are photos from different facilities that we toured, and it just gives you a representation of what spaces might be off of that main common. So upper left-hand corner, food service has gone the direction of higher ed, so you can see a true almost higher ed type food service purchase there. The kind of fitness and cardio areas, the upper right-hand corner, would be a little bit more than your second floor mezzanine today, and then a competition gymnasium in the lower right-hand corner, a little bit more capable of carrying all of the sports activities that your district has in addition to the gyms that you have currently. Off of that also would be performing arts and all of those music areas that go along with those performing arts. In the upper right-hand corner is just showing you a finished auditorium today. Your auditorium would be treated acoustically with light systems, sound systems, and finishes to make it feel like it was a contemporary auditorium. So this starts to move out to the different new pod areas. And I say pod, and I should just be talking about the academic areas. This is similar to what folks saw at Upper Merion. This is connecting 3 stories and allowing you to have the instruction, the making areas, the presenting areas, and it allows almost an entire collection of students from one area of the building to gather for a presentation, so that you almost have 2 mini auditoriums in the building in addition to the larger one. When the building was built, it was built with an auditorium. The back of the spaces had the opportunity to break out as large group instruction spaces, and you had an audion. And so these are meant to replicate that with the additional number of students. This is just spinning you around, and what this is really trying to show is with those courtyards that are currently there, this would allow you the opportunity to have that area with daylighting right into those courtyards and allow kind of this interior-exterior connection on the inside of the building and really give you some nice areas for students to do work on good days.
That, just to be clear, that courtyard there is enclosed.
Well, it's not enclosed with a roof, but it has building around it.
Correct.
Yes.
It's secure.
Correct.
Put it that way. Yeah.
And just looking back down at a presentation area there. So spaces that we're finding many times in projects like this that are directly adjacent to and off of that, the upper left-hand corner, we're finding that the instructors and teachers are getting workspaces, and if you go to the idea of the building almost as a community college where classrooms are functioning more as a space that can be used for learning rather than my space to be decorated by me, then you end up with spaces for teachers to actually have these work areas. And I don't want to confuse this with the idea of teachers having their own rooms, because the lower right-hand corner is a teacher with their own room. So which parts of the program can allow you to leave rooms open that can be scheduled accordingly, and which classrooms are individuals' classrooms like the lower right-hand corner? Again, these are all things that you as an administration and a board get to decide as to how the building gets used eventually. Lockers are going away. What you're finding in a lot of the new buildings is that you're potentially putting in 30 to 50% of the lockers that you did for the student body, because students just aren't using them. And so what we're finding is, instead of the lines of lockers on corridors, we're instead finding these clusters of lockers that just become parking areas for your stuff as you come into the building and leave, and many students don't use them. So that's just another way of looking at things that's changing a little bit today. So this is a vision of what A33 could look like in the A-pod. Anybody who's been in the space, I should have probably put the photograph of what that space looks like. If you found a way to open up the perimeter and potentially take some of the roof area out and raise that roof, you could bring daylight into that, which would also allow daylighting into the classrooms from the inside. And so this is sort of replicating the other learning clusters that I just shared with you, but in your existing pods, which is a really interesting thought, that if you were able to do this and convert that space and leave what's there, you've already got part of what you would do if you were to build a new space like this. So this seemed like a really great conversion of that space, still allowing daylighting to really flood into the interior of the building. And I think what you're seeing out of all these images is daylighting brought into a building that today does not have a terrific amount of daylighting in it. And what we find about, and we can all have discussions about the academic effect of daylighting. There are studies out there about the good effects of daylighting on academics. Regardless of that, human beings need daylight, and spaces like this make it feel a lot better to be inside than some of the spaces that are there today. And this is just turning around and seeing what that would look like from another side and another side. Spaces off of that would include classrooms with breakout areas and things like that, and that's what you're seeing here. You're also seeing an image like that in the upper left-hand corner in another building, and this is happening more and more as you look at the buildings across the United States serving high schools today. So finally, how does the Main Street idea work? And actually, there's one more set of images after this. So you have a series of classrooms and a corridor that runs adjacent to the auditorium, and there might be a way to break out your administrative area on the left-hand side that's currently there, move it all to the base floor of K-Pod, and open the walls up to allow daylighting into this Main Street idea going by your main courtyard. So in this image, the auditorium is on the right-hand side under the shield, and you can see how the space has been broadened to allow for passageway of large numbers of students that would migrate back and forth from the bus entry to the commons and then finally off into the arterials that run off that area. The second part of this, though, is branding and wayfinding, and so this gives you a great opportunity to start to brand the building at all these areas and give students some real vigor as they walk through based upon the district that they're going to, but also to give them some wayfinding as they move through the facility. So we've talked about academic areas. Now we're talking about a circulation route and just looking at how that might feel as you look at the connection between all these points. And then finally, some areas, some buildings that we all looked at as a team that do the same kind of thing. Not the one in the lower right-hand corner, but the two upper ones are the project that we all looked at down in Virginia. And it has incredible branding as you enter the building and as you move through the spaces that are designed to accommodate the large number of students going through there. And then what you find are these wayfinding ideas, and they were focusing on nature and space and so on as the definers of each of the areas of the building. And then you would see third floor, fifth floor, and so on that went along with that. So great opportunities for the district to do things like that. The last space, and thank you again, Dr. Bauer, for defining STEAM. This would be the center of the STEAM area being the Media Center and Research area. That's your current library. But that's your current library with 4 large classrooms above one portion of it removed and allowing you to open this whole thing up physically. So it's a whole new space once you start to look at the building just a little bit differently. And it gives you that connection between the research spaces, the science rooms, the technology rooms, and that research area, and makes it feel a little bit more like a higher ed type space. And this just spins you around a couple of ways. You can also see the ability to accommodate a large volume of students in all of this, which again is something you're trying to achieve with the number of students you'll have going to the building. And these are just some of those spaces as depicted from other buildings that we toured. We're not going to focus on these, but what we wanted to do was to show that we could blend the K-Pod and the Audion in with new entries and new gyms and still carry the same material feeling of the building around. And make our additions feel like the original building is still a very important part of that. And so these are just some of the initial renderings. These will change even more than the floor plan will change as time evolves, but it does give you a good sense of the scale of the different pieces as they might get added to the building if you move around it. This would be, as an example, the bus entry side of the building, allowing a pretty large number of students to filter off of buses and onto the main street going across the inside of the building. And that's just a fitness area looking out into the playing fields. Those of you who have been to the Spring Ford complex, that is taking from the same idea as what they've got out there facing their playing fields. So a lot to take in. Ideas kind of came out of all of the workshop processes. They will evolve significantly, as we said. You're not seeing a final concept. You're seeing something that we had to give folks in order to estimate. These will meld as we work through the budgeting process, like any project that goes on. Next steps, though, we'll talk just a little bit here about what happens next. We have kind of shepherded the team here through meetings 1 through 5. Each of those is actually an activity, so there are 10 to 20 meetings in each of those. But we're at the point where there's the pre-referendum schematic design estimating going on now, and once all of that melds with a budget, then that becomes a pre-referendum package. And we start giving you all kinds of imagery that you can start to generate some of the process with. And we had shared this with everybody quite a while ago. This is even prior to really thinking about where the referendum itself fell in the whole mix. This assumed a referendum sometime in January. It could move beyond that without any problem, but it was also starting to put together the design process, permitting process, and all of those portions of the project. We have with us, though, also Mike Paston, who can tell us just a little bit about what might happen after that part of the process.
Thank you. This is really about design concepts tonight, not in the details of referendums, but I wanted to remind you of a few items. Voter approval is needed to exempt the debt from the Act 1 index. That's the whole idea of a referendum. A decision on timing of the vote will be made once a dollar amount has been established for the space required for the 9th graders, and not until then. We need a number, and then you can move forward with the referendum if you so choose. District priority is and will remain that the entire community is fully informed about the project and participates in the vote. As for the timeline, board will adopt the resolution for referendum on the 9th grade space. Again, this is separate from the main project. This is the additional 9th grade space. Referendum is, well, as I just said, only to accommodate the 9th graders. You must finalize the amount to be put on the ballot. If it's a special election, the resolution must be passed between October 8th and November 6th. That's to hit a special election after the general and before the primary. And the special election date has to be 45 days after the resolution is passed. And then this is just a sample. I've gotten some questions about this. I worked on the words. This has to go through the solicitors and the county boards of elections, but it'll be something like this. Shall a debt in the sum of X dollars for the purpose of financing the creation of space for 9th graders on the North Penn High School campus be authorized to be incurred as debt approved by the electors? That's it. Everyone will go to the polls or do their mail-in ballots with that one single question, yes box, no box. That's the entire election. There's no other people or questions on the ballot. So this will have to be tweaked, and there's some laws involved, but it'll be close to that because it's in the Debt Act. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schrader. I'm assuming you have no questions, so do I have a motion to? No, just kidding. All right, fire away.
So, thank you, Mr. Schrader. I feel like every time I get to see the next step in this process that there is a palpable excitement about where we're headed here. I think Mr. Gilmer's video really captured that for sure in that first stage of this process of bringing a focus group together, members of the community, to get their input. I was part of the second meeting, and I was there to listen, and I did hear a number of stakeholders in the community who did continue to suggest that integrating the 9th grade as opposed to creating a completely separate structure for them, was preferable, at least to those particular stakeholders. And it was parents, there were students, there were teachers who expressed that. So my question about that is, one of the selling points, I think, of a 9th grade center, separate in and of itself, was that it could be constructed initially and then used for the other grades in a phasing of the construction process, whereas then we would bring the 9th grade in last. So if we were to do an integrated process, how does that change that plan, if at all?
So I can speak instructionally and then certainly from a phasing standpoint, I'm sure. So the square footage needed to account for 9th graders being added to the high school campus, whether it's integrated or not, doesn't change, right? We still need to add the same square footage. So that addition coming first and used as a swing space still helps us accelerate the project rather than pod by pod without having to use modulars or something like that. So in this case, whether we fully integrate ninth grade and it's just a part of the building or it's kind of a standalone entity, we haven't programmed yet what those spaces would be in the addition, but if they were ninth grade or if not, it's still the same size addition, still usable for swing space.
Yeah, and then you look at the logistics. And this will not be an easy project, and I think the construction managers will tell you that from the start, no matter what we do. However, if we do those 2 classroom areas on the right-hand side of this and utilize K-Pod at the same time, those structures plus K-Pod actually accommodate a good portion of the 10th to 12th grade as it is. And so what that would start to do, if you thought through the phasing carefully, is it would allow you then to go from pod to pod after the fact, once that's all built, prior to the ninth grade moving back. So your original concept, regardless of whether it's an integrated 9th through 12th grade building when it's finished, you've still got enough classrooms to be able to phase yourself around the building as you construct.
Excellent. And Jeff, again, for clarity for the community, as we keep talking about, and we have talked about this in terms of a ninth grade center, and this is probably actually more, not for you so much, Mr. Schrader, but that language in the referendum, how is it that voters will feel confident that that money is going to be spent on everything related to ninth grade specifically, right? If I'm a voter and I'm saying, well, I thought I was voting on a ninth grade center, but now they're saying they're integrating it, but I'm still voting for this money, how do I know that that money is going to the ninth grade specifically, since that's what the language says I'm voting for?
Yeah, great. So we've had extensive question or conversation about this. So the language, as a result of the feedback, in particular from these meetings with the large group, has evolved from ninth grade center to the addition necessary to house ninth graders on the campus. So it's not exclusive for ninth graders, but what space is needed to be added in order for ninth graders to move to that campus? So that's an excellent question. And that's why the additions are what is being priced out in particular for the purposes of the referendum.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great questions.
When I look at the building, I see all sorts of opportunities for the students, but I have a hard time conceptualizing the different kinds of teaching instructions that are going to take place, because with this new environment, just like when they opened up the offices for corporations and stuff, you have dramatic changes in how an organization works. Could I get some views on what you see as the future of teaching at the high school?
Yeah, so great question and great points. And you're right, when the corporate world moved to a more open model where you kind of plug and play wherever you are as opposed to having an office, it kind of changed how everyone worked. So the more modern high schools and the more modern teaching and learning has transitioned from a stand and deliver, right, type of process to a participatory process, right? Kids are doing now more than they are sitting in rows and desks and the assembly line way of teaching. The whole concept behind having flexible spaces and open areas is so teachers can collaborate, classes can come together, work together. You can't do that in the current structure that we have, right? It's very enclosed. The hallways are 6 feet wide in some places. You just can't gather in spaces. You don't have spaces where 50 kids can gather and work together. That's the concept behind this. It would certainly take professional development. It would take some shifts in curriculum, but we have time for that. But when we go to these high schools and these other, even elementary schools, and see these things in action, it's a total shift in instructional practice. So as we move forward over the next few years, if this were to pass, and if not, we have to obviously plan, develop curriculum, and provide the professional development and resources needed to implement.
And that would be true.
Mike.
That would be true. No, that would be true even if we don't go with the new building. That we would have to move towards this view of education. because it is the 21st century view of education. It's not the old 19th and 20th century view of education.
Sure. So certainly we expect people to be current and modern with their instructional practices, but as Dr. Tolino in Upper Merion said, when your facility is limiting the type of instruction you can provide, you have a problem. We currently have that problem. And in option 2, to be totally honest, Mr. Resch, I don't know that many of these opportunities would present themselves with option 2 because we wouldn't have the spaces and the finances to be able to do some of these concepts.
I'd like to add that, at this point in time, starting last year and really moving even further more this year at the high school specifically, we're implementing performance-based assessments, right? So performance-based assessment to try to get away from all of our assessments being paper and pencil tests, which is certainly an old model for education. Not that there's no relevance to it, but to have expectations for all teachers, not just science, not just math, but FCS and music, any assessment, to have some sort of performance-based evaluation. To have a space like what Mr. Schrader is presenting will open up so many possibilities. The idea of a STEAM center, right, where students can go and put their hands on 21st century tools and actually do something, apply the learning that the instruction that they're getting in class. With the given building restrictions, that would be more difficult. That would clearly be a challenge. And so I think that what this building is doing is we are a little bit ahead of the curve in that regard in terms of how we want to think about what instruction looks like and not just say, okay, we have a building, what are we going to do with it now? So the high school has been doggedly working on this. The teachers, department heads have been working with administration to figure out what that looks like with Dr. Waters, with Pam, to really take a comprehensive look at what we're doing instructionally, and I think that this is going to complement that and actually exponentially add to that experience for our students.
If I could add on real quick, as a high school educator myself, I think Dr. Bauer said that we began this conversation in 2017, and the pandemic slowed things down for this conversation. The silver lining of that is we get to see now in practice what the students' needs are following the pandemic and all those challenges of education that they brought. What that means is we're not talking about 21st century education anymore. We're talking about the next generation of education. And it's based on student need. It's based on what students are presenting with in these classrooms already. Mr. Fusco made a comment about project-based learning, these types of activities. A personal story from my classroom, the students don't want to be in a classroom so much all the time, right? They want to get out and they want to collaborate. And that's the kind of education that is coming next. And I'm just going to point out for a moment that the silver lining of us taking these steps at this moment is that we do get to see farther into the future than we would have 5 years ago.
I know you know this term. This gets us away from the sage on the stage instructional model that has pretty much been in place for about 140 years now or so.
And if I can add, I've seen over the last number of years a craving from the staff at the high school for these types of spaces. We have very few of them right now, but what we do have are utilized heavily. And on any given day, any given period, if you walk through the high school, you'll see groups of students on the floor in the hallway, which is certainly not best practice, but the learning that's in effect is top-notch, and we want to see more of those spaces. If you look in the main concourse specifically at the high school, where we've instituted some high-top tables and some collaboration spaces, that is used all the time. Students have their Chromebooks out. They have academics on their minds, and they're doing great things in those spaces. So the more of those that we can provide, the more we'll see that grow.
Can I just say that I toured the Upper Merion school system when the group of us went, and I love the open collaborative spaces, and I saw that in your design, Mr. Schrader, and I'm sure it's not all totally flushed out yet, but as I looked at the Upper Merion collaborative open staircase that went up to nowhere, I saw stair rails. I didn't see them in our design, and I'm just wondering, I know if I was a teacher, I can't walk up those stairs without a stair rail, and so that's why I said maybe the design is not totally flushed out yet. And then I'm also wondering, how do we have the students who might suffer from a disability navigate those spaces? How do they get up there to sit with their peers, to be in that collaborative type learning? And, you know, I'm looking, everything looks great if you're able-bodied. So how do we incorporate them?
Super questions, and though you're right, it's not totally fleshed out. It's the big idea, and that's what we're trying to get at. The idea, though, is to take what you currently have as 2 elevators in the building and add an elevator on each end in strategic locations, so that you're giving folks the ability to have a very short movement to whatever floor at whatever level their peers are at. And the missing part is the middle of a stair, which is not an accessible spot, unfortunately. So you're dealing with the top or the bottom, and we do our best to make sure that they've got as many opportunities as everybody else has.
So you will make sure they could either sit in the lower or access the lower part? We would make sure that they could access the lower part of those staircases or the upper part.
Yep. And your memory of Upper Marion was where they had those, we call them genius bars around the perimeter.
Mhm.
They're just seating areas for computers that you can sit at knee height. Those would have also stations at different levels to allow people with different levels of mobility to access those as well. Yep.
Thank you.
Could you not, I'm just curious, could you not install like a motorized chair to help students actually access those others, you know, sort of like in Gremlins, you know, that scene where the lady rides up. But that type of device for students to be able to access any of the steps as opposed to just the ones at the top or the bottom.
They call that evolution of design, and we can keep talking.
Okay.
So I have a quick question and comment about the branding and way showing concepts. We hear a lot, both within the community, at board meetings and other places, about the great things that are happening in the building right now. The Engineering Academy, you know, there's just so many things, right? But I'm going to be very honest, when you walk into the building, you don't see them represented. I don't know where, I kind of know where the Engineering Academy is only because of meetings and things that are taken. It's just things are missing. And if you go into one of our elementary school buildings, you do walk the hallways, and you get a sense of what is happening far more, because elementary schools use every space to promote and advertise and share. But our high school space is not. You barely kind of know about a few clubs that have access to antiquated, weird-shaped bulletin boards. But some of the programs and services, and both academic offerings and other services, you don't see. I only know them through parent communication that we receive or learning about them in the community. Will that be something that with the branding that will happen? I want to make sure that we make very clear, is the branding the North Penn logo, or is it much more expansive beyond?
Yeah, so the branding, first of all, we're not the branders, you are. And so you'll have the opportunity, upper left-hand image here, I think we all know what that district is about when you walk in there. And you can see the world in the center of that. You can see the primary terms that are important to the students. And then I think you can also see in the upper 2 right-hand corners what each of those floors is about. And that's the kind of thing that we're going to give you folks the opportunity to develop. And quite honestly, the best projects for us are the ones where the students are developing this. So if they can identify what their areas are about, they want to create the graphics, all we have to do is buy the wall covering, and it gets printed with the graphic that they want.
Is that horticulture I'm seeing with the flowers, and the other one, the sciences, with the microscopes?
Yeah. Okay. Well, and right, so you're seeing astronomy on level 5 right there. Level 3 definitely is probably the bios and so on. Yeah.
Okay.
Could I ask about, I'm sorry. What's that? Could I ask about any kind of increased accessibility to the North Monco Technical Career Center that's just on the other side of the property line? Was there any plans to make that more accessible to students from the building?
So one huge point, I actually had my monthly superintendent's meeting today at North Monco Technical Career Center, and a hot button topic among the superintendents was how much more appealing it's going to be for the North Penn student to go when they're on campus, right? Our ninth graders right now being elsewhere, they have to be taken away from their friends to join North Monco. Now, the other surrounding districts have that same problem because it's adjacent to our campus. However, our ninth graders are not currently at the high school. So they have to be not only separated, but they're also going into a building with other kids they don't know from North Penn. So that's the first point, the accessibility for our ninth graders being on campus, walking with their 10th through 12th grade peers over to the building. So, and any throughway or anything to point out on the site, Mr. Schrader?
Yeah, so there was a discussion about some connection, as you can see, it runs north-south in the image. It's probably east-west in reality, but up into the parking lot of the North Monco Tech Career Center. So there's already an idea to physically connect the two campuses to some extent. And it's just a question of to what extent are we actually allowing a lot of flow of traffic through these spaces? And we'll talk about how to limit that or how to allow it, depending on what each agency wants to see.
Thus far, North Monco seems very supportive of us collaborating on throughways in and out for both of us. So.
And marketing those programs to ninth graders is incredibly important because they're certification programs. It takes a number of years to actually complete and be ready when you graduate to go to work. So if you decide, you know, midway through your 10th grade year you want to do it, it's likely too late for you to actually take advantage of the programs because you've almost aged out. You're not going to be able to have the time in. So to be able to make it more appealing to our ninth graders is simply going to make it that much easier for them to be ready to work once they graduate.
Yeah, and so many students graduate with multiple certifications as well. And that's just going to open up more time for that to get done. Good point.
The way, I don't want to get too nitty-gritty into their schedule, but the way it works right now, I believe the middle session is only North Penn kids. So they have an AM session, a PM session, right? And let's say you're coming from Methacton, Park Valley, Souderton, Wissahickon, right? You're not simply walking across the campus to get to school, but they are busing kids back and forth. Well, the only students that attend the middle session are North Penn kids, right? And so this would allow the opportunity, perhaps, because we have such a high concentration of 10th to 12th graders at certain times with certain programs, maybe because of our proximity, we could have a higher number of students during the middle session. We just can't access it all because of the ninth graders coming from 3 separate locations to get to the tech school. So
I have 3 little questions. First question, I think, is to Mr. Scrocky. So because the ninth grade center is being integrated in with the 10th to 12th, will we still maintain separate budgets?
Well, there'll be a separate budget for the referendum portion. That debt will be separate from the rest.
Is it going to be more complicated if the systems and such are going to be, for the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th are integrated?
That's going to be a challenge for
Okay.
the Schrader Group and Dewey Engineering to try to ascertain exactly what those, what that allocation is going to be. But from my perspective, from a budgetary standpoint and tracking, it doesn't make a difference.
It doesn't, but it will when you look at the line items to say, okay, how do you separate, you know, this room is now being used for 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. Okay, so that's still going to be separate, so I understand that. Second question is, Mr. Schrader, when this is finally designed and it's laid out, will there be some type of mock-up, you know, when you go into a new home center and they lay out the development and they lay out the homes, will that be in the lobby of the school or the ESC for us?
So are you talking about a model as an example?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, that can certainly be arranged, yeah.
And the reason I think about that, it's a visual, and I don't know if it can be dynamic. And I'm not looking to waste taxpayer money. I'm really not. I'm looking for something that would be fun, visual, for students to see, the community to see. And as sections become developed or integrated, maybe they turn a certain color or something like that as a tool, sort of like the Reimagine website, but in a visual. And then the last
if I can just interrupt real quick. The Schrader Group did know those manipulatives. I know you were there and had a great time in the sandbox with us, but they actually gave us those manipulatives so that we could do exercises with the kids during the school day.
Okay, nice.
So the high school administration is sharing them with the engineering academy.
All right, okay, good. Yep. And the last question is, and maybe this is to Dr. Bauer, at what point in the process will we be able, or our students be able to participate in design, construction, project management, all of those pieces?
Yeah, so Mr. Schrader was incredibly excited when I reached out to him about this. Like, we want to get kids involved in the process. And he said, this is our favorite part of our job. So, Mr. Schrader, if you could enlighten us on how you've involved students in the past.
So one of the things that's important to us, we have a pretty robust mentoring program just in our office, and it's important to us to bring certainly college-age students in to understand what our profession is about and the whole building industry is about. But we also do that for high school students, and when you have the opportunity to put ourselves back in the classrooms with your tech ed programs, with other programs like that, it gives them the opportunity to have real-life connection to what they're doing, too. So we'd be more than happy to volunteer time to be in the classroom as well, and I know the Dewey folks have done the same thing over time as well. So you'll get all facets of architecture, engineering, and construction for your students, and they can participate in the design as a whole, too.
If contracts are tentative for second quarter of '25, would we actually start to see students, if not this semester, so to speak, in January of '24?
Would they
After the referendum?
Would they be included? The answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I hear no further questions for now, so get back to work. You guys have a lot of work to do before mid-October, right? So just really excited, Mr. Schrader, and thank you to you and your team. You guys have really put the pedal down and accelerated things for us. It's very exciting. Looking forward to the October vote, and then we'll hear what the community wants in January.
Yeah,
Thanks
and
for
let me
the
just say I'm very impressed with this process and the manner in which you've taken this feedback and truly incorporated. I know that there's probably some people that way thought like, okay, this is lip service. This is truly not lip service. This is not coming from the board. These design, it took me a little bit by surprise when I said, oh, really? This is the way we're moving? But you know what? They are the stakeholders. They are the ones. This building is for the community, not for the 9 of us. So well done on the way that this process is being unfurled.
Well, and we appreciate the opportunity and the fact that you have that number of people together that are participating and are sticking with it. That's very important to us. So thank you to all of those folks.
Can I just say, too, that one of the most difficult tasks in the activity where we laid everything out was not so much the building, but the field space around, which I know we're not here to talk about because the most important is that, but like, that was the hardest part, was plugging in all those fields. And the way that you've done it, and I've been zooming in on some of the images, every outdoor activity under the sun is represented and has adequate space. And anyway, it's exciting. So I hope everyone is happy once everything kind of comes together. And I know we're still very much at the beginning, but that is a masterpiece around the edges.
All right, thank you, Mr. Schrader. Is there any other business from the group? All right, seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn? All right, folks, we're adjourned. Have a good night. Thank you.